Welcome back to the 50 Shades of Horror Challenge. I'm your host, Roommate. Today's movie is 1986's The Fly. Here's where you can find this sci-fi body horror movie, the 23rd in our series, available for streaming. There's a lot to love about this movie. I'm sure you can tell from the list so far that I'm a fan of the 80s. And while a lot of that has to do with the MTV teens being gaudy and rebellious, it doesn't end there. As I said in another Geena Davis movie on our list, Beetlejuice, I love the practical effects of this decade. The Fly has some impressive visual effects, which manage to be revolting even if you understand they're not real. The physical presence of the mutations are felt in a way that digital artistry still struggles to convey. Speaking of the digital, the retro-futuristic computers this movie showcases are another treat. This time before the personal computer was mainstream, but after the invention of MS-DOS was special. Because the presentation is charmingly antiquated, yet familiar enough to be intelligible. Watching the computer explaining the outcome of the teleportation is more fun than it has any right to be. And the stylized sci-fi presentation is just one small part of this wondrous conception of teleportation. Watching Jeff Goldblum as Seth Brundle excitedly describe his invention shows why speculative fiction is so much fun.
Human teleportation, molecular decimation, breakdown, and reformation is purging. It makes a man a king. From the moment I walked out of the pod, I felt like $1 million.
His performance in this movie is so impressive, both in terms of appropriate casting and in showing his range. He goes from an out-of-touch but endearing scientist to a deranged beast. I can't imagine anyone else in the role.
Most earth-shattering invention ever. The one that ended all concepts of transport, of borders and frontiers, of time and space.
And the chemistry that Geena Davis as Veronica Quaife has with him is palpable and compelling. The impact of the movie hinges on her performance, which is intense, believable, and relatable. She's focused and morally sound, but she's still playful and sly. A perfect balance of responsible and winsome.
Nice.
And though her gamut doesn't have her cross the line into unsympathetic territory as Jeff's does, it's still quite vast. Her acting is so strong whether Ronnie is joyous, worried, devastated, or terrified. It's so immersing.
Is he still in love with you?
How could he not be?
Though I can't call their characters' attraction good acting, as Jeff and Geena married within a year of The Fly's release.
Is this a romance we're having? Is that what it is?
Yeah, could be a romance.
And while this is hardly a conventional romance tale, the early scenes where they fall for each other are wonderful. The blurred lines of their meeting with the ambiguity between the professional and the personal are captivating.
I thought this was personal. You can't write about this.
What are you talking about? I'm a journalist.
The movie wastes no time, immediately diving into the purpose of Ronnie's journalism and Seth's goals.
Your stocking has just been teleported. Disintegrated there and reintegrated there.
This is incredible.
And while she susses out whether he's a fraud or a genius, his charm shows her that he is well worth the risk.
I just want to eat you up.
The Fly's optimistic and romantic beginning may feel out of place at this point in the series, but just wait. One of the stipulations for the 50 Shades of Horror series has been no anthology movies. This was because I thought the scariness could vary wildly from segment to segment, breaking the smooth transitions. The Fly poses a similar issue to anthologies, because the movie starts off very tame.
I'm working on something that'll change the world and human life as we know it.
There are very few frightening elements in the first half, with barely any hint at the forthcoming grotesquerie. Even the early failure of the monkey's teleportation comes off more as tragic than scary. But as the story continues, it consistently creeps into more and more nerve-wracking territory. Seth's gradual transformation begins with minor causes for concern, with his blotchy skin and unhinged demeanor.
You're jealous!
Though even those red flags might be extensions of his normal personality, which is shown as a tad eccentric.
5 sets of exactly the same clothes?
Learned it from Einstein.
But each scene shows him further and further descending into the inhuman, first losing all semblance of propriety.
Don't give me that born-again teleportation rap. I told you I'm scared to do it. What do I have to say? I'm not gonna do it.
You're a fucking drag, you know that?
Then as his body gruesomely falls apart, his sanity erodes and he begins speaking incomprehensibly.
I'd like to become the first insect politician.
But by the end, he stops caring about the distinction between people and their autonomy over their lives. His last semi-intelligent thought is to regain his lost humanity by combining himself with someone else.
A family of 3 joined together in one body.
As that plan hits its inevitable snags, he doesn't hesitate in cruelly torturing those who stand in his way.
Insects, they're very brutal. No compassion. No compromise.
The last vestiges of his human form are shed, and he's so revolting that sympathy for him becomes impossible. Veronica's gross situation of needing to put this monstrosity out of its misery is peak horror. It doesn't get much scarier than seeing someone so close to your heart decay into something so violent and chaotic. As a whole, since the movie takes its time ratcheting up the fear, it deserves to be near the middle of the list.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
But as far as scary finales go, this has got to be up there as one of the most disturbing the genre offers. The movie's end is, unlike anthologies, very much intertwined with everything that came before it. This isn't an eclectic selection of scenes, this movie is holistically designed with no extraneous parts. Every moment organically develops its one central premise, so it must be judged in its entirety. And reconciling its charming beginning with its soul-crushing end, The Fly shouldn't be on either end of the list. Though if there is one movie in this challenge that can act as the gradient of all 50 in microcosm, it's this one. So if you want to test the waters with someone, just see when, if at all, they want to turn this movie off. If they get too uncomfortable when Seth wins his arm wrestling match, maybe don't go too far past The Sixth Sense. But if they make it through this movie just fine, they'll probably be okay until at least the late 40s in this series. If they only start squirming after the gyno visit, tell them to suck it up. The movie only has 10 minutes left.
I detect a certain uncertainty here.
If they make it through, though, hopefully they'll find that their comfort zone is a bit bigger than they originally thought. One reason I recommend The Fly, and horror in general, is because it lets us discuss difficult topics. And while I don't expect anyone to have to cope with a loved one being mutated via telepod, the sad truth is that many people deal with their bodies no longer being their own due to some unwanted malady. Our DNA may not turn us into gigantic flies,
I'm becoming Brundlefly.
but it does tragically make many of us change in terrible ways. And when those pathologies take our bodies and minds away, it's just as senseless as the fly joining Seth. There is no greater purpose or motive behind disease, and many aren't even given the courtesy of knowing the cause. Losing yourself or watching someone you hold dear lose what made them unique and being unable to stop it, it's so sad.
There must be something we can do, somebody we can go to, a test that can be done.
Though it makes you sick as much as it makes you cry, because watching the familiar crumble away evokes unease.
Oh, that's disgusting.
You learn true fear in those eerie moments where it's not clear if the person or the disease is winning.
I'm an insect who dreamt he was a man.
And while this isn't a fun topic by any account, it's a side to life that we'll inevitably deal with in some way. The Fly is a powerful representation of that traumatic experience in an exaggerated style. It's so condensed, showing someone go from the highest point in their life to literally falling apart in just a few days.
Artifacts of a bygone era.
This heightened portrayal shows the long, painful journey succinctly, allowing for catharsis from the heavy burden. The story's unrealistic elements grant it universality, since it could be a metaphor for anything. Another primal fear shows up in the movie when Ronnie discovers that she's pregnant with Brundlefly's offspring. There's a very effective dream sequence where she delivers a huge maggot creature. Thanks, I hate it. She wants whatever it is growing inside her out as soon as possible, and seeing Seth, who could blame her?
I don't want it in my body. Do you understand me? I don't want it in my body.
Even still, her grim determination is chilling, as she says that the unborn life must end one way or another.
I'll do it myself if I have to.
The movie also doesn't shy away from the brutal fact that this means killing off a part of Seth that could have lived on.
The baby might be all that's left of the real me.
These deeply personal problems that the movie presents in all their ugly gravity earn its status as a classic. The contrast between the sweet allure at the start and the swift, cruel end begs us to cherish our health and love while they last. This week's recommendation for another review, or should I say retrospective, is from Oliver Harper. His channel reviews current movies and classics alike, breaking down the different art department's contributions. He gives insight into the creative process, using media coverage to explain how movies developed. For instance, in this clip he talks about a deleted scene that may have made this movie much tougher to stomach.
One scene that upset test audiences was when Brundle does a test on a second baboon with a cat to test a fusion experiment, which goes wrong and it fuses the animals together and it attacks Brundle. Anything involving animals being tortured or mutilated upsets most people, even though it's not real, but the idea of seeing it is never my cup of tea.
So check out Oliver Harper's The Fly retrospective, and you can find the link in the description. Make sure to come back next Saturday for the 24th movie in the series. It's 2000's Ginger Snaps. here are the many places where you can stream this movie that's about the trials of being a sassy teenage werewolf. Until then, I hope you feel like a goddamn force of nature, like you could do just about anything. See you then!